I've been recently a lot of years on a very track.
Tony Fletcher says, I just knew that at this moment in time, while he was being slandered and libeled and pilloried in death, that I would do anything to set the record straight. Alice Roosevelt Longworth said, if you haven't got anything nice to say about anybody, come sit next to me. Tony Fletcher.
Thank you, Anique, and thank you for putting this wonderful event on.
Welcome.
Yes, it's lovely to see so many beautiful people. So I'm just going to read something short from a memoir that's called Boy About Town, and it does actually relate to another book that I wrote, which will become kind of obvious as I read it. I heard the news from Nicky Horn on Capital Radio in London at the start of his show at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night. Keith Moon had died at home in Curzon Place earlier that day. Whether it was a heart attack or something else, a drug overdose perhaps, was yet to be determined, but the circumstances didn't change the reality. Keith Moon was dead. My grandfather had died when I was 4 or 5 years old. For reasons I had never figured out, my brother and I had not been told about it until after his funeral. Other than that, I'd never known anyone who'd died. Death was always something that happened to other people. But this death happened to me. It hit me in the gut, like a bully had punched me there, and I felt myself go weak inside, the stuffing knocked out of me. Barely a month ago, I had introduced myself to one of my favourite people in the world, one of the most famous people in the world, and he had been nice to me. He had been sweet, gentle, and kind. He had written down his home address and invited me to come around and see him. In the process, he had shown that I need not be scared of or awed by rock stars, that they were human like the rest of us. He hadn't responded, though, to the letter I'd slid under his door in Mayfair 3 weeks ago. And whether he had ever intended to, indeed, whether he'd ever read it, I would now never know. But I felt like I knew him all the same, and I reacted to his death as if it was a member of my own family. I bawled my eyes out. Keith was all over the newspapers the next day. He dominated the front pages of the tabloids the same way the Sex Pistols had done after they swore at Bill Grundy. The Daily Mirror ran the headline, Drugs, Death, Drama of Pop Wildman Moon, and the other papers offered their own speculative accounts of his demise. He had been Moon the Loon, infamous for drinking and drugging his way across the world, leaving a trail of damaged hotels and ravaged women behind him, and now, they seem to be suggesting, he had gotten his just reward. They had no idea. Thousands of us looked up to Keith Moon, felt kinship with him for the way he had lived his life, free of convention, of expectations. For the example he had set to those of us who derided the 9-to-5 life, who shivered at the prospect of ending up in a suburban semi-detached with 2.4 children and a dog, who decried that businessmen in Britain all wore pinstripe suits, that secondary-age school children were forced to wear uniforms, that the teachers had long stopped caring, that bullies ran rampant, that the streets were full of violence, that the buses never ran on time, that the country shut down at 11 p.m. with the national anthem as a reminder of our pervasive monarchy, and that the sky was perpetually overcast and the air permanently damp, that the older generation clung to an empire that no longer existed and had been built on violent conquest to begin with, that they genuinely believed that the return of national service and beating with the birch would solve all the problems of us youth, that fascism was gaining ground, that skinheads were increasing in numbers, and that, by their very design, with their endless rows of terraced streets and parades of small-time shops, our towns and cities promoted anonymity and servitude. Keith Moon, a working-class boy from Wembley, had emerged from all of this and shown that you could rise above it, that you didn't have to sacrifice your dreams for the security of normality, that you could, by your talents and your determination, and yes, your lunacy, take control of your own destiny, to live your life in the stratosphere, far above the miserable majority of the human race, like a comet streaking through the night sky. In his case, that flame had burned out already, and I didn't know enough to fully understand why or how. I just knew at this moment in time, while he was being slandered and libeled and pilloried in death, that I would do anything to set the record straight. Thank you.
Oh, my glasses. A reminder, Jackie has a table with books that a lot of the writers brought up their books, and Jackie is selling them in back. Phil Pardi says, it's surprisingly hard for angels to get their hands on aspirin. George Eliot says, the golden moments in the stream of life rush past us and we see nothing but sand. The angels come to visit us and we only know them when they are gone. But Frank O'Hara says, oh, kangaroos, sequins, chocolates, sodas, you really are beautiful. Pearls, harmonicas, jujubes, aspirins. Phil Pardi.
Good evening. Y'all look great out there. This first poem mentions the Chinese poet Li Po. Some of you may have heard of Li Po. He was the crazy wackadoodle Tang Dynasty poet about 1,000 years ago. And I ran into him not far from here on a rainy day. This is my encounter with an 8th century Chinese poet. It's called Plum Blossoms, Thinking of Falling. Suddenly, I'm sure of it. My lover has been flirting with Li Po. After 3 months of drought, it pours. We wake to find the roads thick with lily pads. A rushing that won't stop. The frogs are rioting, amazed. I find Li Po washing his feet in a ditch, and we sit for a long time in the silence of plum blossoms, thinking of falling. Later, on the day he leaves town, I'll find him near the pharmacy. You know, he will say, that cloud right there, if you squint your eyes a little, if you look at it at an angle, head up, like this, with your face squinched sideways, that cloud, Philip, it looks a lot like you. For now, though, we sit. I watch as he washes his feet, toe by long toe. I'm on the verge of doing nothing with this moment when he catches my eye. How many birds, he says, does it take to wake a poet? Was this a joke, I say? And then for the first time, I notice waxwings hopping berry to berry in the holly bush. 3, I say, no, 7. But Li Po is already shaking his head. 3, he says, with you it's always a 3. How would it feel, I wonder, to punch a 1,300-year-old poet? Once he's gone, my lover takes to swimming alone in the moonlit lake, and I to watching her, waiting for what I'm sure is here to be learned, until what is to be learned is to swim, too, even after this lake that appeared so suddenly disappears into the dry fields. This poem goes back to after we moved here. We lived for 3 years in Austin, Texas, and we came back to New York to beat the heat. This poem, the occasion of this poem is being in New York, but needing to return now to Texas at the end of the summer. It's called Leaving Angelo. Leaving Angelo. How long, he says, does it take, he says, to drive? 4 days, I say, 7 different states. I always liked, he says, a drive. He says, his every sentence incised by commas of air begged off of thin blue tubes. Once, he says, we drove, he says, to Florida. So many dead deer, but beautiful the trees. By the window, his lover holds his own hand. The hum of hospital voices continues its slender recital as we all watch Angelo breathe. He offers a smile. It's like here, he says, and he nods to the screen of odd parabolas rising beside him. It's my dashboard, he says. And this, he says, twitching his nose so the tubes are raised in relief. This is the wind in my face. The horror of how we go on. In Philly, a fan belt snaps, we lose 2 days. In a Motel 6 in Arkansas, my son takes his first fertile steps. Home again after 7 days, an answering machine awaits, alive with lights. Thank you.
Violet Snow says, when Mary told her parents she wanted to be an embalmer, they flipped. But I thought you liked beauty school, said her mother. Henry David Thoreau said, we should go forth on the shortest walk perchance in the spirit of undying adventure, never to return, prepared to send back our embalmed hearts only as relics to our desolate kingdoms. Violet Snow.
Thank you, Anique. You're doing a great job, as usual, putting this together. Thank you. So I'm actually going to read the first couple pages of that story by chance. The Embalmer. When Mary told her parents she wanted to be an embalmer, they flipped. But I thought you liked beauty school, said her mother. Can you imagine me opening up a beauty parlor on Main Street, Mary asked, talking to blue-haired ladies and housewives who watch General Hospital? Well, you could take the stud out of your tongue and the rings out of your eyebrows, her mother said. That would help. It's not about how I look. You watch Steel Magnolias. Beautiful movie, she nodded. Poor Julia Roberts. Beauticians are like therapists. They have to talk to their clients or no one comes back. Can you picture me giving advice on Social Security? How about bedwetting? You could keep the little rhinestone in your nose if you want. Customers would find that tasteful, I'm sure. Mom, you're not listening. Her father broke in. Morticians have to be like therapists too, you know, grieving people and all that. I'm fine with talking about death, Mary said. It keeps people from talking about American Idol. She's probably the only person her age who doesn't watch TV. In her opinion, it rots the brain and is worse than drugs, which she stopped taking after she almost OD'd on ecstasy 2 years ago. Also, she's a little ADHD, and the way TV never stops moving, it makes her feel insane, on top of everything else going on in her head. She likes to work with her hands because it gives her a focus, calms her down. But whatever gave you this crazy idea, her mother asked. My makeup teacher, she said. One day she said that some cosmetology students go on to learn how to make up corpses, and I thought it sounded cool. Cool, said her mother. You think dead people are cool? Guess what, Mary? Dead people are not cool. They're stone cold dead. Calm down, Louisa, said Mary's father. At least she wants to do something with her life. A year ago, you were worried about her drinking herself to death. Death, her mother keened. She's obsessed with death. It's those goths that got a hold of her. Mom, I haven't hung out with the goths since I was 12. You should be glad about this. Embalmers can make big money. I looked it up on the internet. Her dad runs a crusher at the gravel pit, and her mom is a lunch lady at the high school. If she'd decided to be an accountant, they would have been proud. But she's learned that you can't live your life by what other people think of you, especially your parents. In the end, Dad gave her the money to take the bus to Harrisburg and check out the mortuary science program at Riften University. Harrisburg is only 2 hours from Simpkinsville, but her parents have always avoided the city, just like a lot of people do who've lived in their little town for generations. Even the adults call the city Hoburg, as if it would wreck the morals of their kids, as if there wasn't enough dope and girly bars in Simpkinsville to keep a bunch of reprobates busy for the rest of their lives. Mary doesn't like the nickname. It's crude. She's been to Harrisburg only twice. Once for a hot boot concert where she lost her bra in the mosh pit. That's when she stopped wearing bras. She wasn't about to dish out her hard-earned money from Dunkin' Donuts on a new bra, and she discovered that her tits are small enough that they hardly jiggle without one. For a year, she always wore a sweater in the house, even in summer, and her parents didn't notice. By now, of course, she doesn't care what they have to say. Her other visit to Harrisburg was when she had to have a little operation. She was only 15. She borrowed some money from her cousin Melissa. She pretended to have really bad cramps so she wouldn't have to go to school, and when her parents went off to work, she got on the bus. At the clinic, they clucked over the fact that her boyfriend hadn't come with her, and she couldn't tell them that she'd been so drunk at that party she had no idea who the father was. They kept her there for hours afterwards, making sure she was okay to get on the bus. When she dragged herself into the house at 9 p.m., her parents thought she was stoned and they grounded her for a week. That was fine. For Catholics, nothing is worse than an abortion. If they'd known, they might have kicked her out. Mary sifted through these memories on the bus ride to Riften, and she felt like a bird facing the open door of its cage. At the school, she was interviewed by the dean himself, a tubby, red-faced guy. He told her they take everyone who applies to the program, but most people drop out the first year, since the requirements include hard courses like anatomy and physiology, and even regular stuff like math and English. It's a collegiate course of studies, Miss Randall, he told her. Not everyone is well-suited. What were your grades like in high school? Not so great, she admitted, but that's because I couldn't really see any reason to learn that stuff. Now I have a reason. I want to be an embalmer. I really do. We train you in more than embalming, he explained. We teach you management skills as well. When you graduate, you will be able to open your own funeral home once you have some experience. That's super, she said. Where do I sign up? There's a problem, though, he frowned. You'll have to start out working for someone else, of course, and sometimes women of your stature have difficulty getting jobs in the profession. My stature? At first she thought he meant she was poor, and she got pissed. Who did he think he was? It turned out he meant she was too short. She's 5'2". You have to be able to handle bodies, to pick them up from the place of death, load them in a van, carry them in and out of the embalming chamber. It's part of the job. I'll work out at the gym, she assured him. She'd never lifted anything heavier than a hairdryer, but she was that determined. We offer no guarantee about getting a job, he warned her. Just give me the student loan papers. Thanks.
Holly George Warren says, the first time I met Alex Chilton, I threw up in his sink. Thornton Wilder says, the art of biography is more difficult than is generally supposed.
Thank you, Anique. And actually, I would like to dedicate my reading tonight to the memory of the great part-time Phoenician Tommy Ramone. Tommy, we miss you. I think I'll pick that quote up. I like that one. I'm just going to read a little bit from the epilogue of my biography of Alex Chilton, and I don't think it'll really be a spoiler for the rest of the book. It just will kind of give the backstory of how I got to know Alex Chilton, kind of like Tony got to know Keith Moon, his subject. The first time I met Alex Chilton, I threw up in his sink. Since he was tight with Lux Interior, who vomited regularly from on stage, I think Alex didn't mind too much. I hoped that he was too occupied with his paramour in the other room at the time to notice. My friend Melinda and I had been the recipients of Alex's kindness that summer night in New Orleans in 1982. First, when we happened to bump into him, just off work and clad in a standard issue dishwasher shirt. On the streets of the French Quarter, he recognized Melinda from 4 years earlier, when she and her then boyfriend had lived in Memphis. Her musician Beau, a Big Star fan, had been drawn to the city due to Alex's work there. Then they each moved separately to New York, and that's where I got to know Melinda. We were now driving around the country a la Kerouac and Cassidy, and because we'd been listening to Big Star and Alex's Like Flies on Sherbet cassettes on the Honda Civic's tape player, meeting Alex seemed like an extraordinary event. After the requisite exchange of birth date info, he was a real astrology nut, we apparently passed muster because he enthusiastically showed us the bars of the Quarter where he made cocktail recommendations, though he wasn't drinking a drop. I remember lots and lots of cigarettes, maybe a joint, some good stories about the history of certain watering holes, and also Alex's anticipation about his then crush Annabelle's getting off work. When she joined us, they kindly accompanied us back to our car, which was parked along Canal Street, a very long walk. That trip turned out to be in vain. Our car had been towed. By then it was 2 or 3 a.m. and we'd spent all of our money. There were no ubiquitous ATMs back then, and our belongings and extra cash were at Melinda's brother's house in Slidell. So, gentleman that he was, Alex Chilton welcomed us to crash on his couch, which we sheepishly did. The next morning, we slipped out to find a payphone, as Alex didn't even have a telephone. In our haste to meet Melinda's sister-in-law and get some cash to retrieve our car, we didn't get a chance, or maybe we were just simply too embarrassed to say goodbye. Well, fast forward 2+ years. I had by then joined an all-girl band called Clambake, named for an Elvis movie, you might know it. And we had gotten a little record label deal to cut an EP. Alex had started gigging again, and since I'd once met him and he had produced the aforementioned Lux Interiors band The Cramps, as well as his own work, we wanted him as our producer. After the Chilton Trio's performance at Maxwell's in Hoboken, my first time seeing Alex live, I clomped down the rickety steps to the dressing room, located next to kegs and cases of beer. When I began to introduce myself, Alex said, "Oh, I remember, October 10th, citing my birthday. Without hearing a sample of our music, he agreed to be our producer for $500 and a lamb chop dinner. So we made plans for a recording date in April 1985. Can't believe it was that long ago. I was 5. I don't remember a whole lot about our sessions, which took place at Murray Hill Studio in Manhattan's East 30s. I mainly recall the Chaka Khan gold records hanging on the wall. It didn't even occur to me that Alex had once had his own framed gold records. As a kid, I'd bought a Box Tops 45. That was his own band, his early band when he was 16. If you guys don't know, he was the lead singer of the Box Tops and sang The Letter, which was #1. So I think that was 45 years ago, something like that. I can't remember if I'd ever mentioned that I'd bought his record Sweet Cream Ladies myself, not one of the bigger sellers, when I was a little kid. But I think if I would have told him, he would have laughed or held his nose. As a producer, Alex was, as most groups he worked with have recalled, laissez-faire. He didn't make too many suggestions. It was my first time in the studio. I played rhythm guitar on a Fender Mustang, and I had no idea what to expect. Later, in another band, when I worked with a more hands-on producer, I realized just how great it was having Alex there. He seemed genuinely enthused about our music, even though he was laid back about it. He didn't make us feel like amateurs who didn't know what we were doing. Instead, his mellow vibe helped us feel relaxed and comfortable enough to sing and play fairly well, without having the jitters screw up our natural approach. His main contribution was mixing the 4 songs we cut. Sadly, Our record never came out. We went out on tour, playing the same circuit as the Chilton Trio, had a big fight, and broke up. Before that happened, though, Clambake performed with Alex's trio at Folk City's Big Combo series. Avant folky R. Stevie Moore, don't know if anybody knows him, was also on the 3 bands for $3 bill. Later, Moore quipped about that night, quote, "I heard Alex remark to the packed audience something to the effect of, 'What the hell was that first guy?' He knew bad music when he heard it." Actually, in Alex's book, it was often enough, the badder, the better. At load-in that evening, I realized I had forgotten my fuzz pedal, but Alex let me borrow his 1973 Buick LeSabre with the missing driver's side window to pick it up from our rehearsal space. He could be a generous guy. That year, 1985, marked the beginning of a sporadic friendship between us. When I got serious as a music writer, Alex generously accepted my request in 1992 to interview him for Option, my first music profile in a national magazine. When we talked for the article, I'd just co-written my first book, and Alex was interested in that, a volume on the creative process based on interviews with 75 musicians. I'd also assisted Ben Fong-Torres on his biography of Graham Parsons and had had no idea that Alex had been a big GP fan since the 1960s. I gave him both books, and to my surprise, he contacted me later that year. Would I be interested in writing a book with him about his life on the road in the 60s with the Box Tops? Before I could say, yeah, he told me, "Yeah, I've already got a little title for it. I slept with Charlie Manson." Whoa, okay. That caught my attention, and I hoped it would also intrigue my literary agent and a publisher. Alas, the book never happened. In June, Alex's brother, Howard, died suddenly, and the following year, Alex began playing with Big Star again. I visited Alex in New Orleans, but he'd gotten too busy with other things to spend the kind of time necessary to write a book. We never discussed the project again, though we did stay in touch. In March 1998, Alex graciously invited my husband, Robert, out there, and our little 2-month-old son, Jack, to visit him in New Orleans. He had finally managed to scrape together enough money to actually buy a house. We were giddy new parents, and he was proud to show off his own baby. Before we left, he gave Jack a strand of Zulu beads. By 2004, the last time I had a lengthy conversation with Alex, who died suddenly in 2010, I'd seen his trio numerous times, as well as the reconfigured Big Star and reunited Box Tops. One of the most special shows was the night the lights went out in the Knitting Factory in February '97, when Alex played for about 80 of us gathered around him in the darkness, a kind of campfire sing-along in Lower Manhattan. As I wrote this, the performance had just been released on CD, or in the clouds, as Electricity by Candlelight. Listening to it again 16 years later is an emotional experience. Alex's generosity and joy in playing an impromptu selection of songs he loved illustrates perfectly who he was as a musician and music fan. And when I hear myself, much younger, hollering out, "What's across Texas?" an unheeded request, I think of all those other times I watched Alex perform my favorite songs, and even better yet, those I'd never ever heard before, as well as many chats that led to my discovery of a special record or a cool book. So, in ending, I have to say to Alex, we never got to write that book together, but I hope this one will do. I left mine out in the rain. There may be some tales here that he would have preferred I left untold, but I did my best to tell Alex's story, convey the brilliance of his artistry, and describe the complexities of his life and times. His singular voice, songs he wrote, the guitar lines he played, the life he lived enriched us all. And as he once aspired to be, he truly became a self-made man. Thanks.
Thank you. Richard Treitner says, "No amount of studied skepticism can alter and experience truth." Winston Churchill says, "Men occasionally stumble over the truth, but most of them pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing ever had happened."
Is it on? Yeah, I can see it. Sorry. first poem is called Prayer for the Body. This body is borrowed, it is not mine. I found it by the entrance to my time. I leave it by the door when I leave. May it serve me well in the moment. May it hinder me not as I go when it is due. It will be returned. I give thanks for this gift and this loan. I give thanks for this flesh and this bone. May I continue to be worthy and to grow. May I cherish every moment as I go. So mote it be, blessed be, amen. Aho. This is called Shakespearean Rant. More than a spoonful sloshing over the lips, frothy goodness shooting from his hips. Romeo, bro, Romeo, my golden male hooer friend, a pound of your flesh is not good enough to satiate the massiveness of the masses, to masturbate the masticating molasses, the proletariat that fuels the goons of your politics, the greasy business moon that oils the machinery of your vulgar refineries, slapping sticks and pounding boots, forever stomping the faces of the lovers' beloved loved ones into a submissive broth, a centaurum for the sustenance of vulturous leches, and I with my bootylicious ass am onion-eyed, blinded by the type-faced blindness that comes of reading too many of Prospero's cursed books. Hark! What linguistic buffoonery breaks yonder window's pain in the ass into little frosted capulets and terra-coated for ease of swallowing and digests them feathers and all. More than a room full of witnesses who view it merrily, greedily, fresh from their ships, emptying their bullets and clips, their tongues lashing clits, while searching out some idiosynced dude in Juliet drag, a nunnery, a rookery, a repository for the knowledge that nowhere is safe, condoms break, and no one is a saint to be trusted, only feared, pulled like taffy by the ears, salt water candied new fuel proposals that will be buried like Tesla and his coils, Macbeth and his boils, my own sordid toils. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, can you dial up Fandango, get the latest movie times while killing your own people? By the classroom full, by the boatload full, by the barrel full of crudeness? Can you stew in your own lewdness, stick a feather in your cap, and call it Uncle Sam's triumph over the savages without smirking as you're jerking? And I'll try to fit this one in. Rosebud. Stuffed full, twink style, puckering up for Jesus, for Allah, for thumb out hitching a ride to the rock, hard to get ahead, clean your room for Buddha. Ganesh will remove those obstacles, the checkpoints, the privateers, plump with fillings, devoid of feelings, bribe an official for Bridget. Gaia smirks at your pipelines, oil refinery, planet-killing bombs, and what the fuck? You think there'll ever be peace in the Middle East? Cream pie full and ready to blow perpetually. Feet in the stirrups, fucked by the world, drone drilled and spit upon, hustler, hooer, senator, clown. We voted for this. By doing nothing, we opened wide for angry fists, hungrily, insatiably, clinging to riches, to trinkets, to anything that would kill us, pretending we wanted a savior, but only to laugh at, clamoring for enlightenment, but only to better see our bungholes by, our asses for kissing goodbye to, piled up, rump-clump, cum-dumps, piled up along the borderlands like children seeking asylum, and never realizing that to refuse them is child abuse, is murder, is genocide along the Rio Grande. But at least it keeps the racists and mercenaries gainfully employed, picking them off, popping their cherries for salvation, for salivation in the back alleys, virgins waiting in the next life, for Taliban, for Tea Party extremists, corporate puppets, flaming assholes, raped by inmates, asylum refused and anally screwed to overflowing, and just like every other taxpayer, enslaved by the system, grabbing their ankles and screaming, "Yes, sir, I'll take another load," and a ruined rosebud never looked so sweet.
Richard Treitner. Alice Graves, oh, books, in back, books. Jackie at Golden Notebook table. Alice Graves says, make a mental note to write a country song about a woman in a bar on a Sunday night in a dark, damp place with no buildings, only trees. Maybe she has a white line on her finger where a wedding band used to be. Maybe had bears, we had one, or zombies bearing machetes. A Russian proverb. The church is near, but the road is icy. The bar is far, but we will walk carefully.
Hi, I want to thank Anique, and I'm really excited to be reading here tonight. I write memoir, and I just discovered the haiku form, and so I've got two haikus. One is an extended one, and one is a short traditional one about friends that I've lost. Lois, curly hair bouquet, smiling behind large glasses, you're in the 10th grade. She strums Joni style, dark Scorpio, ruled by Mars, feeling all the words. Winter afternoon, Ouija board, candles, seance. She is Queen of Wands. You are 15. You don't know anyone who's dead, except for Woody. You own the night streets, cool, inhaling Marlboros. The two of Wands rule. Flower power, folk music, Washington Square afternoons, positively fourth. Graduation day, you leave for college alone, too depressed to write. 30 years later, you meet again on Facebook. Two mothers of sons. Today's her birthday. You click on her timeline page and read the farewells. You light a candle, look for her in the night sky. The 5 of Cups drawn. And this one is called Eddie. Deep black ocean eyes, smile at me, make me feel real. You jumped off a roof. Thank you.
Sparrow says, I'm opening a sushi bar inside a McDonald's. Adam Ross says, I play golf, but sometimes it's so unrelaxing I have to play tennis to wind down. Now that I think about it, this process is sort of like when I go out for sushi and have to get a slice of pizza afterward. James Geary says, aphorisms are food for thought. Like sushi, they come in small portions that are both delicious and exquisitely formed. And, like sushi, I can never get enough. Here's Sparrow. Is enough light there?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm going to read some poems about life in Phoenicia. The first one is called Self-Analysis. Am I shouting loud enough? Self-analysis. I'm no longer a mama's boy. Now I'm a mama's man. Yeah, you get it? This is a true story. No offense there. This is really embarrassing. This is a true story that happened to me in Phoenicia. It's called Tuesday Morning. one dandelion on my lawn, and one snake. Thank you. And you know how writers have a writing room? This is a poem about my writing room. It's called True Story. My writing room was once an outhouse. Now I'm going to write a poem, read about my neighbor's cars. You know how your neighbor has 7 cars in their front yard? This one's called My Neighbor's 7 Cars. God bless my neighbor's 7 cars. They must serve some purpose, though they seem to just sit in her yard waiting. Actually, waiting is a purpose. Okay, so this is a really, I'm taking a chance here. It's a pretty complicated poem. It's about being in my house and listening to the crows. I'm sure you have experienced this same experience, except you were in your house, probably. So in this poem, there's 2 crows. One is like the near crow, and one is the far crow. You know what I'm saying? You can follow that, right? Okay, this is called 2 Crows. When the near crow stops singing, I can hear the far crow. Oh, yeah. Okay. This is a very, sensitive poem about, I'm in front of my house and there's this puddle, and then I'm thinking I'll look in the puddle and I'll see what's in the puddle, then I'll write a poem about what I see in the puddle. You know, a puddle reflects things? Right, you know that. So I called this haiku. Maybe it isn't a haiku, but I called it a haiku. Haiku. A puddle reflects 1/5 of an elm tree. Yeah. I think I'll read this. This is another one of I'm in my driveway type of poems. This is called Thursday. Something's meowing. A tree? A fence? No, it's a cat. Think about it. So, I think I'm going to end abruptly with this poem. This is a poem called Multimedia. So it has a note afterwards. I'm going to wait till afterwards to read you the note, like a footnote, you know what I'm saying? Multimedia. This is a multimedia poem. Note. I rubbed this page with fish scales. Thank you.